Hi kids, Mrs. Boyd Live here. Today we're talking scientific method. Hey kids, hey, you're home right now and you have a lot of time to think. One of the things you should think about is what you want to do for your science fair project next year. It's something you could be starting to research and plan out. I wanted to really distinguish two things. One type of project is a demonstration, and one type of project is a science experiment. What you really want to make sure you have is a science experiment, and that follows the scientific method up here we are going to discuss. What's a demonstration? It's when you show how chemicals react with one another. For example, the paper mache volcano, where you put the vinegar and the baking soda and then it just all comes out of the volcano. That's not a project. That's a demonstration. You really need to show something. You need to test a theory, test a question. And I'll walk you through this, and we'll talk about one of my son's experiments, his projects that went all the way to state. He won second at the state level in California with this project, and it was really something he was just very curious about. He knew a lot about it, and the judges could tell that, but it was also a pretty significant finding when he tested his hypothesis. First of all, he had this question. He said, I want to know which football helmet has the best shock absorbency. A lot of the NFL football players were suffering from something called CTE. And it's when during the autopsy they've opened up their brains and they see that their brains have this degeneration from too many hits to the head. He wanted to know what was in his football helmet. So he took the football helmet from his high school and then took a couple helmets from other high schools and helmets from my husband when he was a football coach at high school, and he tested the absorbency because what he noticed is inside all of the foam was different. One of the helmets he was using this year had D3O in it. It's a new absorbency. It's a new type of patented material that he researched and wanted to put to the test. First of all, he has to have a question. Simple. Which football helmet does absorb the most shock? You could be more creative in how you say. I don't even remember how he said it. I don't even remember where his board is at this point. But the second thing you want to do is do research. So why did he have that question? Because of CTE. He wanted to know how important it was to have a good helmet. So he researched CTE. He also researched this material that was in his new helmet called D3O. He also researched the other helmet's foam inserts. He researched what was on the cutting edge and how important it is to have a shock absorber in your helmet. You have to do a lot of research before you decide what your hypothesis is going to be. So we've got the question. We've done the research. The next thing we do is we form a hypothesis. This is where we look at our helmets. We look at our whatever we're doing. Maybe we're doing plants, whatever it is we're testing. And we say what we think will happen in the experiment. A hypothesis, I don't even remember what his hypothesis was. I told him to do this video for you, but his hypothesis was something like, I think the helmet with the D3O will absorb the shock 50% of the time better than the other helmets. He actually felt like that material did take the shock and distribute it in a way where it kept it away from the body. And then you go and you run your experiment. Now, here's a big mistake that people make when they run an experiment. The first thing you have to remember is you should run the experiment 3 times. You should make sure you do and have consistent information time and time again. So 3 times minimum running your experiment. You also should remember that anytime you have any human interference in the experiment, you actually mess up the variables and the control. So every experiment needs a control. Everything should be controlled, actually, and one variable. Everything else about the experiment should be considered a control. So whatever apparatus you use to test, let's say you're testing plants and you're deciding which material will make a plant grow better. You put lemon juice in one, a half a cup. You put water in one, and in the other one you put the same amount of water, but you sprinkle coffee grounds on there because that's said to help the fertilizer. And let's say you just do that. That's your one variable. You don't want to do anything else different. You want to give all three plants the same amount of sunlight, the exact same amount of liquid, same amount of soil, the same type of plant. Make sure the plant is the exact same height. Everything has to be controlled except for that one variable. Now, one of the other things you need to remember is you're not going to win any science fair competitions doing an experiment with the plants. You need something cutting edge that these scientists that come in and judge are going, ooh, that's new to me. And so you really want to test something that maybe nobody's even tested yet. And I've seen some pretty incredible ones over the years. So when you run your experiment, the one thing Jensen had to do with the helmets is he put eggs in plastic bags, put them inside the helmets upside down. And he had to make a pulley and a lever. And he made that with a ladder and a pull brush, and he put it like this. He put a chip clip on there, held the helmet with a string, and then released the chip clip, which released the helmet, because you can't have any human touch on that. What if I want this helmet to work better, so I'm gonna let it down softer, and this one I'm gonna throw down? See, when we're humans, we can interfere with it. So we really have to have that sort of system where we don't touch it. Everything drops the same way at the same speed from the same height. And that's how he dropped the helmets time and time again. Every time he tested it, he tested how many eggs broke. And then he could turn that into a percentage to find out. And it turned out the one with the D3O, it's a non-Newtonium. It's actually made from silly putty technology. And silly putty was developed during World War, and it was developed to put into uniforms, but the guy could never figure out how to turn it from a clay to a foam. And so this guy in Britain figured out how to turn it from a clay into a piece of foam. And now you can see it in Olympic gear, in ski equipment, helmets, toe shoes for ballerinas, and it's appearing all over the place now. But this experiment tested it, and lo and behold, those eggs rarely, I think 1 out of 8 of the eggs broke in the first experiment. And then, all of the other eggs just splattered in the other helmets. The shock absorbency was way off. So it was a very good finding. It was a good way of saying, I have data now. I have data to prove that this helmet is safer than the others, that upon impact, this helmet is going to absorb the stress of that impact and keep the player safe. And that's a really significant finding. That's a finding that you can put in an article and somebody can use to say, wow, our team needs to invest in this D3O technology in these helmets. Yeah, they cost a little more, but it's well worth it. It's going to protect our players. And so the data is when you tally up that experiment and you collect that data by doing the experiment. And then finally, drawing your conclusions is when you write up your conclusions and you tell, this was my hypothesis. I hypothesized that 50% of the time the eggs were going to survive the drop, but really 90% of the time they survived the drop. And they performed what percentage better than these other helmets did. So that's when you make your comparisons and you put the graphs together and you draw the charts and you draw pictures of your pulley and lever system that you built to drop the helmet so that the judges can see you didn't have any human touch and you didn't throw the helmets down, but you just simply released a lever and they dropped. And so this is really, really important that you have the constants, that you change nothing but one variable. Remember, the only thing that changed in the experiment we just went over is the type of helmet. Everything else stayed the same. Everything else was constant. And so that is your 6 steps to a science experiment. Make sure that you use this method and you can have a very successful science experiment. Start thinking about it. Start wondering about things. Science is just all about curiosity and saying, why does this happen? Or how does this happen? Or what if this happened? What if I did this and changed this? What result would I have? So start thinking about that. And this is a great time to do it. Start planning it out and doing your research and forming a hypothesis. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.
No, why does it have to end?